Hey, we are back and it's so great to see your smiling face. And speaking of being back, I just got back from Lake Tahoe. I was actually in Lake Tahoe for the last week shooting or spending a lot of time with that Canon EOS R that I picked up not too long ago. And while up there, I managed to pick up a bit of a cold. I can't hear out of this ear. My throat feels like it's going to fall out, so I am nursing, a tea. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about 12 things that you need to know about the Canon EOS R. And a lot of this is spending a lot of time with this particular camera that I wanted to be able to share back with you guys. Now everyone knows that I've been primarily a Nikon shooter over the course of my career. I added Sony to a mix a few years back, and then I picked up a Panasonic GH5 earlier this year. But the most recent camera is the Canon EOS R, which we are filming this on. I have to say, I'm wishing I would have jumped in a long time ago, guys. Though this camera isn't perfect, I've been extremely impressed with it. So this got me thinking while I was up in Tahoe. If you've been knocking around the idea of picking up a Canon EOS R, what would you want to know before you spent a dime on this thing? If you hang around to the end of this video, you're gonna learn 12 things. 12 things. Some are gonna be good, some are gonna be bad, that you should consider about the Canon EOS R. Pull up a seat, let's go. Let's kick things off with talking about the ergonomics. Guys, the ergonomics on this thing are an absolute dream. This camera replaced the Sony a6400 in my bag. One of the beefs that I had with the Sony was that it was so small, particularly the grip. Now, my pinky finger would dangle off the bottom of the grip, and while I never felt like I was going to drop the camera, it wasn't the most comfortable carrying experience. Now, the Canon EOS R totally changes that. The grip feels great in the hand even after hours and hours of shooting. It just feels as if this camera was designed to be held all day, which is really nice. I was a little nervous coming from my Nikon experience that I wouldn't really like the Canon's arrangement of buttons and dials. However, the more that I use the EOS R, the more that I like how Canon placed everything. The shutter button is perfectly positioned, the buttons and dials on the top and the back of the camera are easy to use and intuitively placed. Now, I don't think I would ever find a camera that felt so good in my hand as my Z7, but man, the EOS R, guys, is really giving this thing a run for its money. Another one of those items that I got to spend a lot of time with up in Tahoe and really get an appreciation for is the rotating EVF and LCD are so darn cool. Now, normally when you take photos or videos in portrait orientation, the information displayed on the EVF and the LCD remain in landscape format. Not so with the EOS R. Instead, the information rotates with the camera so you don't have to try to read the settings and other display information sideways. That's just smart and innovating feature that I really appreciate about this camera. And since I'm shooting more and more video, the fact that the LCD flips out and rotates facing forward is a huge bonus for being able to see my position in frame as I'm recording. Focus peaking is a nice touch. Another cool feature that Canon included on the EOS R is focus peaking. Now, I know focus peaking isn't new technology by any means, but it is a first time for non-cinema Canon cameras. If you are familiar with focus peaking, it works by recognizing the edge of contrast in the shot. Those edges are then highlighted to make it easier for you to be able to recognize what parts of the shot are in focus and what parts are not. Obviously, this can help nail the focus on your shots, which we all know is a critical factor in taking the most appealing photos. Next, you can record video at true 24p. Perhaps a little surprise with the Canon EOS R is that it records in a true 24p, whereas most cameras record at 23.98. While that's not a huge difference, what's significant about it is 24p is a frame rate typically reserved for high-end cinema cameras. Now, no one will ever notice the difference in quality between 23.98 and 24p, but the fact that Canon included this feature on the camera tells us two things. First, they really paid attention to what details matter in terms of video recording. And second, they are building a foundation for really great line and mirrorless cameras with excellent video capabilities. Speaking of video capabilities, that giant 4K video crop can now be fixed. I know all the haters out there are thinking about that 1.8 crop right about now. Let me just say, while it's not a big deal for me, it isn't a huge problem either. Besides, Metabones just came out with an adapter that, when used with the RF lenses, gives you close to a full frame crop when shooting in 4K. Yay! Since the 1.8 crop has been the biggest complaint about the camera, well, other than the autofocus system back when it first came out, but I'm eager to see how this can be done with the Metabones adapter in almost a full frame crop. Fortunately, I have a couple RF lenses, so once my Metabones adapter comes in, I can test this setup even further. More on those lenses. I gotta say guys, Canon RF lenses are absolutely killer. Everyone knows that Canon has always gotten high marks for their optics, particularly their L series lenses on their DSLRs. But Canon really stepped it up a notch with these mirrorless lenses and created a lineup of superb glass that is well built, versatile, and it handles like a dream. Of course, the optics are next level good and produce clear, sharp images and video. I especially like the 1535 2.8. I did a hands-on review of this lens not too long ago. Check the link in the description for that. In that review, I talk about how this lens is a huge lens. It's almost 5 inches long and about 1.86 pounds, but despite its massive size, it actually is easy to handle. Just like the EOS R body, the lens and the other RF lenses I've used are smartly designed and intuitive use, so the size and weight really, well, aren't much of an issue. Besides, Canon has stuffed all sorts of goodies into these lenses like image stabilization, electronic manual focus override, weather sealing, and nearly silent nano USM motor and a customized control ring, which I'll get into a little bit more details here in a moment. And with the 1535 lens in particular, it's the perfect focal range for landscapes. I like to have that little bit of extra field of view on that 15mm and for landscape shots that are a little touch wider than the typical 16 to 35. Now, the best part is that there's no noticeable distortion on the wide end. This is done optically too. Canon doesn't correct it digitally, so that really speaks to the time and effort they put into designing and building these RF lenses. Next, you're going to fall in love with the customizable control ring. Now, not all Canon RF lenses have a customizable control ring, but the ones that do, it's a huge bonus. Positioned in the front focus ring, the control ring gives you tons of options for customization. You can program it to control exposure by adjusting the aperture, shutter speed, ISO, or exposure compensation. The control ring rotates fully in either direction, and to give you some feedback, it has soft clicks. These clicks are virtually silent, but if you're worried that they'll be picked up by your mic when you're recording video, you can have Canon declick your lens for a fee, of course. Canon also gives you the ability to have your control ring on older EF lenses as well. Their EF to EOS R control ring mount brings the same customizable functions to your older lenses. That way, if you can't afford one of the very expensive RF lenses, you can at least have the additional control with your EF lenses. And it's only $199, so it's much more budget-friendly option. The EOS R offers tons of customizable options, but just not any custom button. When you shoot images with this camera, there are no less than 14 different camera controls that you can customize. When shooting video, there are 12 controls that you can customize. While all that is great, the EOS R is very slim and trim, and there are very few buttons on this camera than compared to other cameras. Call me old-fashioned, but I like to have a couple buttons on the front of the camera where I can set to whatever I want. This isn't even an option on this camera because, well, no buttons exist. Like I said, it's not like there aren't plenty of customization options on this camera, it's just that the lack of physical custom buttons takes a little getting used to. Speaking of customization, the multifunction bar is nice, but Canon incorporated a multifunction touch bar at the top of the back of the camera to give you more customization options. You can tap on the left or the right of the bar to do certain things like show the focus guide or the electronic level. But you can also swipe along the bar while you're shooting to accomplish certain tasks like magnifying the image in the EVF. It can be used to adjust the exposure settings too. While shooting video, you can adjust the audio levels. Now, when you're browsing images, you can touch the left side of the bar to see the previous image, the right side of the bar to see the next image, or you can swipe the bar to scroll through the images itself. These functions are nice, but they aren't groundbreaking that will make you jump for joy. I will say this though, as the firmware updates come along and more functionalities are added, the multifunction bar could become a much bigger asset. Next, the EOS R uses Canon's old LPE6 battery. Canon has used the LPE6 battery for ever. So many folks were surprised when they decided to use it on the EOS R. But it seems to be holding its own even under a much heavier load of a much more electronic camera than what the LPE6 battery has been used for in the past. Using this legacy battery is a great deal for Canon shooters because, well, you don't have to go out and buy all new batteries and chargers. For somebody like me that has never owned a Canon camera before, this little bonus doesn't matter. However, those batteries are cheap and there are aftermarket batteries that are even cheaper, and who doesn't like to save a little money, right? The money that you can save on the batteries could be used to get that EF to EOS R control ring mount, or maybe you could put the savings towards a RF lens down the line. One of my favorite features about this camera is the autofocus system is badass. Earlier I mentioned that the 1.8 video crop was one of the biggest complaints about this camera when it first came out. The other big complaint was the autofocus performance. At first, the autofocus system was a mess. Nobody is really denying that. But the firmware updates along the way, the advanced dual pixel CMOS autofocus system is absolutely groundbreaking. It's incredible. You get up to 5,655 autofocus points, which you can manually select. The number of available points will differ depending on the camera method that you're using, the settings that you're using, and also what lens you're using. With the aforementioned firmware update, the face tracking in the eye detect autofocus has been vastly improved as well. Not only are these features more accurate, but they are also much more accurate from greater distances. The autofocus system is also better at tracking smaller subjects, both near and far, so you can rest assured that it will acquire the target with greater accuracy no matter how large or how small it is. Even before the firmware update, the autofocus system was ultra fast. Canon claims it can acquire focus in just 0.05 seconds, which is, yeah, that's pretty quick. I believe it too. I've been utterly impressed with the quickness that this thing really acquires focus. The speed combined with the improved performance from the firmware updates makes this camera one of the best I've tested in terms of autofocus performance. That's just not something I could have said a year ago. All right, let's address the elephant in the room. There is no IBIS. The EOS R does not have in-body image stabilization system. However, many of the RF lenses have lens-based stabilization, which is the next best thing. Now, while the EOS R can't hang with something like the GH5 in the image stabilization department, future EOS R cameras might be able to. A few months ago, Canon News discovered a patent that shows that Canon is working on a dual image stabilization system that pairs lens-based stabilization with in-body system. With this dual system, we might see 6, 7 stops or more stabilization. Pretty crazy, right? Okay, wrapping things up. Is the EOS R a perfect camera? No, of course not. But what camera is? As a Nikon and Sony guy, I can tell you that I'm incredibly impressed with the EOS R. In fact, I'm a hardcore Canon guy. I just don't have a Canon t-shirt yet, but actually, I don't even have a Nikon t-shirt. But anyways, this camera fits in my workflow perfectly. It's small, lightweight, easy to use, maneuverable, which makes it the perfect camera for my video needs. With my Z7 in my bag for stills and this thing in my bag for video, I feel like there's virtually no obstacle in my way of getting the shots and video footage that I want. Well, there you go, guys. A dozen things you need to know about the Canon EOS R. If you found this video to be helpful, hit the like button down below. If you're currently not subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button, and while you're at it, hit the bell to be notified as we're coming out with new videos. So with that said, my friends, I'm gonna get out there, play around a little bit more with this camera, and you get out there and take your best shot.
Soon, hopefully, this will be all red. Last night there was a really amazing sunset. The sky was like this really bright red magenta, color, and I'm hoping this mile hike up into the wilderness here is going to pay off with some decent color. As soon as that goes off, I'm going to haul ass down before it gets dark up here. But I did bring some lights up with me as well. My hands are